Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 33. There will not be a big main focus for today, we will just do smaller jobs here and there. If there is one thing that could be called the theme of the video, then I suppose it would be the testing, and then the settling of the new housing blocks on the island. We just need to finish building a couple more amenities, and it's good to go. Apart from that, we will also fix the food warehouse platform, deal with the delivery offices, so they do what they have to do, things like that. We will also expand the farms, since we have a big empty area near Ramesov, all ready for exploitation. Now that the game is reloaded, we can deal with these dividers now. Let's get it out of the way, so the plants can grow as the episode progresses, and we can see them in their full glory. Also, someone in the comments noticed that the trees weren't moving in recent episodes. As it turns out, the game had its graphics settings reset for me. I had a moment when I got an error message about Steam initialization. That usually results in a messed up launcher. Since we can change the settings there, I guess that's what changed the settings. But now it's all back to maximum. I usually leave the depth of field turned off, that option was very aggressive in the past. But now that I gave it another try, it seems a bit more tame. I might leave it enabled for now. Maybe I'll get sick of it later, who knows. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the text-to-speech I've been using. It is a pretty great tech, not gonna lie, but with all the improvements in AI in recent months and years, I've been looking at alternatives. I don't see signs of Amazon jumping on the bandwagon just yet, they seem to be content with their current offering, but compared to some of the newer engines, Poly feels outdated now. The main reason I haven't made the change yet is the pricing models on these new techs. I did find one that I think I could afford, and use it comfortably in one of their price packages, but it will still be a pretty big investment if I do go for it. Right now, I would end up paying about 3 or 4 times as much for it, compared to Poly. Plus it would mean that the current voice will be gone. The alternative I have my eyes on does offer voice cloning tech, so theoretically, I could just import a bunch of my previous Poly files into it, and it would give me a perfect clone of this voice, but I don't think Amazon would be happy with me doing that. Sadly, I cannot really give you an example, they only offer a commercial license if you subscribe to the service, but once you're done with this video, and I cannot emphasize enough to not do it right now, appeasing the algorithm and all that, but once you're done, search for 11 Labs on YouTube. A YouTuber called Matt Wolf has a video about it, where he clones his own voice, and the result is astonishing. It's pretty wild. Anyways, let's get back into the actual video. As you can see, I'm in the middle of replacing the food warehouse branch. If you remember, the one we built in the last episode turned out to be too short for our purposes, so it needs to be longer. Good thing we have this junction nearby, we can just use that as the branching off point. I will place the mix station signal later, I want to finish building the tracks first. And this is the road access for the new museum. I was about to place it while I was waffling on about the AI speech engines, but the main street was still being upgraded. But now it's done, so we could place it without interrupting anything. This is a bit of a shame. Still might do it one day, and just use a cosmetic texture instead of a proper footpath connection. Until this new rail branch is complete, we will need to babysit the track layers a little. There is no crossing anywhere nearby they could use to switch lanes, so they will inevitably get stuck until the last segment is finished. Next, we need to sort out the different delivery setups we have in the country. Right now, we are still using trucks to deliver electronics from the border, when we could be using trains instead. That way, the trucks can focus on doing the town deliveries, and not waste time going to the customs house. I think it would be a pretty great addition to the game, if we had a graphical representation of the different routes in the game world. Only having the list is a bit obscure. They could use those arched connection indicators we see when we hover over the Call Vehicles Home button on certain buildings, like hospitals and police departments. They could indicate which buildings are connected, and show which wares are being delivered between them, by placing the ware icons over the lines. That would take quite a bit of guesswork out of situations like this, where we need to reorganize the offices for evolving circumstances. Anyways, the main idea here is to stop the town distribution office from going to the border for electronics, alcohol, and meat. Now that we have trains, they are a much more convenient way to delivering those things, and the trucks can focus on doing local jobs, wasting less fuel and time in the process. In a second I will even buy a dedicated meat delivery train, so we can have it serve as a storage extension for the local freezer building. We just need a locomotive, and maybe 2 refrigerated wagons. I could have sworn we could set the train depots as destination in the past, so we could deliver train cars to them. Oh well, no big deal. We can just set some other place as a destination, and simply reassign the train to the depot once the cars are all hooked up to the locomotive. There. Now we can tell it to go home to the depot, and we can set it up properly. And the new shopping center is complete. We can go ahead and set that up too. It's the same exact thing we did a million times before. The local distribution office will deal with the food, electronics, and clothes, and have a dedicated meat delivery route, which will have a single truck set to full unload at the shop. That way, we are wasting less fuel on at least those deliveries. If we had a truck unloading station connected to the shop, then we could do the same thing for all 4 goods, but that would be a bit of a waste of space, and I'm not a fan of that. And that should do it. Once those goods are all delivered, we will have a proper shop for the new citizens, who are already eagerly awaiting the opportunity to move into their new homes. As for the refrigerated train, we can set that up too. Technically, we could use the distribution office for that, but I prefer to use dedicated lines for the meat. It's similar to the way the trucks operate. It will go to the border, fill itself up with fresh produce, and then park itself in the town delivery station, and wait for a full unload. That way, it will act as a sort of storage expansion for the local freezer, and it will also use less power, since it spends more of its time standing still, instead of doing a lot of small delivery jobs over and over and over again. There is only one flaw in this plan. And that's the way the station is set up currently. I will definitely need to rethink the way queuing is set up for the station. If more than one train approaches while the meat trains is parked, it could result in a small traffic jam, since one of those trains would end up parking itself behind the occupied platform. Not a permanent blockage, but long enough that we would get notifications about it. But we can just build a crossing later, and that will fix it just fine. Looks like I missed a spot. And the track layer is stuck again. In fact, it must have been stuck for quite a while. We really need to keep an eye on this. It seems the dock and the embankments managed to work quite well together. Not perfect, obviously, but from afar, they look fine. Alright, only one rail segment remains to be built. How about we turn our attention to the new farm fields? Ever since we started using trains for the food deliveries, we have 5 more assignment slots in the farm DOs we could use for fields. So let's place all 5. The biggest hurdle we need to deal with today will be the way these fields get cut down to avoid collisions. There is simply no good way of sculpting them to the perfect shape without using some ugly workarounds. The thing about them is that we could just place a couple dirt footpaths, delete them, and they would keep their shape. At least until something disturbs them even just a little bit, and they will immediately jump back to their old shape. To permanently keep them in their intended boundaries, we need to keep the things we use to sculpt them in place forever. Sure, it looks okay now, but as soon as I place anything near it, it will just go back to the old shape. And the last rail segment on the food branch is about to be completed. Good, now we just need to electrify it, and it's all done and dusted. At long last, the job is complete. Only needs the mixed signal, and it's good to go. Looking at the amount of space allocated for the different goods, maybe increasing some of them to 15% will not be a bad idea. And the Uprising Museum is done. We can at long last start testing the new housing development. As far as I could tell, it should be just fine, but better safe than sorry. As usual, we just let a couple families into the buildings, and if we don't see any major complaints, we can open them up to the wider public. And before I forget, we still need to build a morning hall. I did it in the other parts of the city, so might as well do it here too. This little field seems perfect. We have 3 fields down, and have room for 2 more. No way I'll leave that there. That shape is way too risque. Far from the actual thing, but too close for comfort. Anyways, that takes care of the fields. We just need to add them to the distribution offices, and it's all done. Also, only noticed while editing. Is the field closest to the big rail junction have 2 tractors on it? It seems to be being sown from both ends. Weird. I didn't want to start decorating just yet, I will do it in a future episode, but we do need to take care of the cars. Right now, we have way too many of them using it as a destination, when we need to use it for residential parking only. For now, I just went in blind, but later in the episode, I will do it properly, and use the vehicle ledger to keep the balance between the different types. The problem is, that once a parking spot is reserved by an incoming vehicle, we cannot fill it with a new one, intended for a local owner. Once I'm fed up with the situation, I will just use the Control H trick to send the non-local cars home, so we can fill it up properly. Anyways, now that the food warehouse platform is long enough for all 6 boxcars, we can reset the train lengths at the rail offices. And I'm still a bit paranoid about the way the distributions are set up. I keep checking. I really wish we had a proper graphical representation about the connections generated, but I already said that. At this point, there's no real reason to keep these big refrigerated trucks around. They were useful for filling up the freezer, but that job is now done by train. We still need a couple though, since we are still using them for the prison and the hotel, since those don't have enough parking spaces for a full unload job like we do with the shops. So 2 of the small trucks will replace the big ones. Next, we still have one place that is not connected to the rail network, but in all honesty, it really should be. And that's the clothing warehouse. Thankfully, we have a very conveniently placed branching off point right next to it, and we can use that as a connection point. Yeah, that will do just fine. And it's already long enough to avoid the same problem we had with the food warehouse. And this is where I noticed a pretty big flaw in the current distribution setup at the farms. The grain silo is higher in the list than the clothing warehouse, and that gets filled up first. Since we are selling the excess food production, the grain gets used up rather quickly, and pretty much none of the crops make it to the fabric factory. Once the new branch is complete, we will need to tell the trains to buy some extra crops at the border for the clothing industry, at least until the new fields take care of the issue. Or alternatively, we could just use one office to deliver to the grain silo first, and the warehouse second, and the other office could do the reverse. That might also be a possible solution. At this point, we can place the mixed signal. It only needs electrification, and that can be done with multiple successive segments, so it will be done in one go. So far so good in the new houses. I'm so satisfied in fact, that I decided to open one of them to the public. If it's still doing okay in a couple months, the rest will be open too. Alright, the clothing warehouse is on the rail network. Let's set it up in the offices. As I've said, we will buy some extra crops until the farms get sorted out, so hopefully it's a temporary thing. Wow, look at the money. We are already 2.5 million above zero. I think it's safe to say that we are pretty much set in terms of finances for now. In fact, this is the kind of money that we could use to buy helicopters, and not go bankrupt in the process. Maybe it's time to convert one of the fire stations to have some helipads in the next episode. The time feels right. Anyways, as you can see, I'm busy adding a couple trees to the field. I am fairly certain that this is the last time we will touch this place. Well, not 100% sure. I did download a farm-themed prop pack from the workshop, and that one had a couple wooden fences we could use in certain places. We'll need to see how they fit into the aesthetic. Now that the clothing warehouse has a full stockpile of crops, the amount of smoke coming out the chimneys is noticeably thicker. Before this, it was just a wispy little trickle, now it looks like a busy industrial center. Just as it should be. Okay, let's take care of the cars now. This nationwide ledger of vehicles will be very handy at determining what we need to buy, and how many. First, we need to take care of the non-local cars. We just need to select them, press Ctrl H, and they will teleport home. And with the spaces all freed up, we can start buying the new cars. First, let me arrange the windows for ease of use. We had 2 of each vehicle types in the first parking lot. If we do the same here, we should have about 4 of each model, so that's what we will go for in the ledger. At this point, I completely gave up on making sure to get colors we don't have yet. I'll just do it randomly. As usual, that T603 is a bit tricky, since that's the car we use in the secret police HQ, so we need to discount those from the list. Also, one of you did mention in an earlier episode, that these cars were pretty much reserved for governmental employees in the Soviet era. But if only the secret police used those cars, then they wouldn't be too secret anymore. Giving a couple of them to the civilians will help them blend into the traffic more. And don't pay attention to the fact that only the secret police use them in black. That's just a coincidence. Anyways, that should take care of that. By the way, as it turns out, using the car dealership isn't really necessary. We could just buy cars directly in the parking lot, and get the same result. Now that most of the things I set out to do are done, we could spend some time on decorating the fields a little. We still have a lot of empty spaces we need to fill in, so let's get to it. It's the same exact idea. Use bushes to create little fields. I might be a bit overzealous with the size of the tree brush, but I think it's fine. Looks a bit more wild and unkempt that way. It might be worth using the soil restore tool to create wet mud around these places in the future, so the grass wouldn't hide the small bushes. It can be a bit hard to see what I'm doing sometimes. And the farm fields are already back to their old shapes. I really wish we could just draw their boundaries by hand, instead of having to rely on these temperamental ones we have now. This time, instead of using footpaths, I decided to try using fences. I expected them to be invisible until they are built, only having the yellow ghost image. For some reason that will not be the case, even after removing the UI. Alternatively, I might look into other solutions on the workshop. I noticed that there are some fields with narrower shapes available, and I could also get ploppable fences as a workaround. But something has to be done. Again, it would all be fine if we could draw the boundaries ourselves, but sadly that's not the case. Well, the rest of the episode from now on will be pretty much all about placing these bushes. Nothing else will happen, so if you'd like to skip the rest, I won't mind. This might be a good spot to go and check out the text-to-speech thing I talked about at the beginning. Just search for 11 Labs, all spelled out on YouTube, and look for a video called, "This voice cloning tool could get banned, so let's play with it." I'm still not sure if I will use it or not, but it is relatively cheap. It's just that the one I'm using now is even cheaper. But the increase in quality would be tremendous. Anyways, as I've said, nothing much will happen until the episode is over, so if you want, you can skip ahead to the end, and listen to the outro monologue, but until then, I will go silent. Well, this is it for today. Sorry about the long silence, in the last 5 minutes or so, but I did warn you about it. Anyways, let's talk about what could be expected in the next episode. I will try to find a way to keep the farm field shape if I can. They are way too temperamental, and might jump back into their old shapes at the drop of a hat. We still need to sort out that railroad turnaround thing I talked about in the last episode. We are still using the temporary solution we implemented for the food deliveries, and I would like to get rid of it at our earliest convenience. But overall, we are getting real close to completing this little corner of the Republic, so we might need to start thinking about building that second construction hub at the end of the coastal train ride we've been building in the background. I completely forgot to check on it today, but I suspect that we might be close to finishing it, if not done already. Apart from those, we need to decorate the new houses, rearrange the different bus lines, so they are split between the two bus stations, and deal with some relics of the early days of the Republic. I'm sure there are some leftover things I didn't get rid of yet, like those iron import trucks. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.